Welcome to this video of Python for Economists. The first thing we want to do is to make sure we have the right place to learn Python. So what you should do is make sure you create a Google account. Once you create a Google account, use Chrome to sign in. So I've signed in to my Google account. And the next thing I'm going to do is to copy this link. You can type it, take a look at the link. I'm going to copy it and paste it to be able to activate Google Colab. Now I'll come here and type collaboratory. Hit enter, Okay, here we go. So we generally call it Google Colab, but it's collaboratory. So I'll click on it, click on install, continue, choose my account, and that is it, done. So the next thing I want to do is to make sure I can log into Google Colab. Let me come here, just type this. You can simply create a new tab, and then the new tab, you paste and you hit enter, and there you go. Yours may not look like this. It's because I've been working on Colab for quite a while. So what you want to choose is to click on new notebook. And once you have your new notebook, you are all set. We can start learning Python. The first thing we can do is to use it as a calculator. So I can say 2 plus 5, and if you want to run that, you have various options. You can go to runtime, you can click on run all, and it's going to run it for you, and then create a new code line. So let's just be patient and let it do it. The first time at times, because it's initializing everything, it may take a bit of time. So there you go. And you can click on plus code if you want. And let's do another one. So plus 2. This time I'm going to use shift plus enter. Shift enter. It's going to run it for me. Now, the beauty of shift enter is that when it runs it, it creates an open space here for you to continue typing, so you don't need to come back here. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of what we just did here so that we don't, I will just click here to delete that, come back, click here to delete that. Okay, right now we want to start learning, and the first thing we want to do is to use variables. We are going to look at the different types of variables we have, and then run some basic operations, and also take a look at some conditions. We will be using economic indicators as variables. So in Python, generally you can use a hashtag for comment, and it's a good practice to comment your codes. Okay, we want to create an integer variable. So when you run the code, it's going to ignore this because it understands this is a comment. It's good to comment because when you come back 5 years later or 5 months later, you know exactly what you were doing, and another programmer will know what you were doing. So now let's create a first variable. We can use population. I'll just use pop, and I'll simply give it 10 million. So I can print it. Print is used in Python to be able to run what you've put in this variable. So you've created your variable. Equal is used to assign a particular value to the variable you've created. So I'll go with for pop, shift enter, and I have the variable I just created. So I'll copy this so it's more efficient rather than typing. And now I want to deal with a string variable. No more an integer, but a string variable. This time I want to give the name country, and for string variables you put it between single or double quotes. So I'll say economist land and print it. Shift enter, and we have a string variable. Okay, this time we want to create a float variable. A float variable simply takes decimals. So anything using that takes decimals, we call it a float here. So let's go for GDP. GDP is the market value of all goods and services, so final goods and services you produce in a country. So let's give it 500 million. Let's put point, let's say 1 or 0.0. Here I go with print GDP, shift enter, and there we go. And finally we want to take a look at another type, which is boolean. Now boolean, you generally go with something being true or false. So you can try to know if there is economic growth. Okay, I'll say econ growth, print shift enter, and that's it. So you can always access the values by just doing that. So when you're analyzing data, there comes a time when you want to know the type, because the operations you can run on an integer, you cannot run on a string variable, and vice versa. So let's look at how to get to know what's the type of your variable in Python. So you simply, I'll go with print, and then I'll say type. And the first one we had population as a first variable. So we want to see the type. Population is a variable of what type? I'll just do all of them. I'll just copy and paste, because we created 4 variables. Okay, pasting is Control V, Command V if you're using a Mac. We had country, we had GDP, and we had econ growth. So shift enter, and we can see the type of each of them: int, string, float, bool. So they are very important, because when we move to the section of data analysis, it's important to know the data type so that you know what type of analysis you can run on each. So Python accepts what we call dynamic typing, because some programming languages do not accept that. So let's take a look at what dynamic typing is. So I'll just say so dynamic typing simply has to do with you being able to change the type of a variable. For example, if we've already assigned, let's say, interest rate, let's say the interest rate is 12.5%, and we print it. And we decide to change the type to string. It's possible. And when we print now, So here we have a float type, which is where we have integer interest rate. Suddenly we've changed the type to a string type. So let's run it, Shift Enter, and suddenly we find that it has completely changed. Okay, so it allows that you can dynamically or on the fly change things like that. In some other languages, that's not allowed. Now we want to see how to run some calculations on Python. So hashtag so for example, I know my GDP, I had already given a value. Okay, let me just run it once again so that we have it here. So let me say 100 million, and the population, let's say the population is 500,000. Now, if I want the per capita GDP, the per capita GDP is simply your GDP divided by the population. So we have per capita GDP. It's simply GDP that's an equality sign or an assignment. Okay, now we can print and see what is the per capita GDP. Shift Enter, and here we go. So when you divide that by that, you have that as the per capita GDP. In other words, the GDP by, so each inhabitant has that amount, under the assumption that there is equal income distribution, that the income is equally distributed. But that's not the reality in real life. So now let's look at how we can use concatenate. Concatenate. These are concepts we'll use when we start analyzing data. So I'll just say country 1. So let's use string. I'll call this economic land, and country 2, let's call it United. And now we want to concatenate, so we can just do it in print, within print, and I'll just say country 2 plus country 1, and it's going to concatenate them. Now we are going to adjust it in a few minutes. Generally, it's good to create some space before you do that, but I'll run it so that you see what it will cause. Okay, you see it's put it together, United Economic Land. So it's good to always create some space. We know we are going to unite them, so I'll create some space here, then Shift Enter, and there we go, United Economic Land. Let's see how to check some basic conditions. At times you go to the bank and they want you to put your money so that they can invest it for you, and it's important for you not just to ask about the interest rate, but to also find out what the rate of inflation is. If the interest rate is significantly higher than the rate of inflation, that is amazing. But if that's not the case, if they are equal or if inflation is higher than interest rate, that's a bad deal. So let's do some condition checking. So interest rate, I will give it 3.5%. Now let's say 5.5, and So these are the variables and these are the values which have been assigned to the variables. So we want to check, you want to create this program so that if your friend goes to the bank, they know exactly if they are having a good deal or a bad deal. So let's use the if condition. So if inflation rate is greater than the interest rate, so we always use that, okay? Whatever this is called, the double period or whatever, you use this to test your conditions. So I'll hit enter and you can see it automatically creates that space. This is extremely important. Other languages may use brackets, but Python creates that space to be able to test conditions. If you don't allow it to do that space automatically or you count it by yourself, you'll end up having an error. It will give you an error. So what should it do if this condition holds? If inflation is greater than interest rate, if it is true, what should it print? It should print bad deal. Else good deal. So let's hit enter, given that we already have this initialized. Shift enter, and we expect to have a good deal. Now, what if we change this and we say the rate of inflation? Let me just put 1 in front of that. And I do shift enter. Suddenly we realize it's bad deal. Why? Because this simply means you are losing money. While you are gaining 5.5%, the value of your money is losing 13%. Now let's go and check more than one conditions. Okay, let's go checking more than one condition. We will provide something similar. So I'll just copy this so that I don't have to retype it. And now I'll go with if again. So if, but this time it's simply because you want to make sure that the interest rate is at least above 5%. You don't just want the inflation rate to be inferior to your interest rate, but actually you want the interest rate to be at least above 5%. So I'll say if the interest rate is greater than, I'll say 5.0, and the inflation rate, you want the inflation rate to be less than, I'll say 3.0. Generally, that's the target of the Bank of Canada. They want it to be between 1 and 3%. So if they are fulfilling this condition and the bank is offering you something greater than that, then maybe you want to think about it. So what should happen? Print. So we have more than one condition checked. Now you can say and you can have another print. And you can say invest. Let's go to else. Always put the double point, and we have print bad deal. Condition not met, do not invest. So let's run the code, Shift Enter. And of course, bad deal, condition not met, do not invest. On the other hand, what if we come here and change this and I say 2? Shift Enter, and that's it.